In Romanticism, melancholy is a very strong sentiment and a point of invention of art. We will see this by literature, by paintings, and by the music of Matteo Carcassi. One of the most important writers of the Romanticism in France is Victor Hugo, of whom we have a very, very significant sentence. Despair has ascending degrees. From prostration, one mounts to despondency, from despondency to affliction, from affliction to melancholy. Melancholy is a twilight. Suffering melts into it in sombre joy. And then the most important and famous sentence, probably, melancholy is the happiness of being sad. So, melancholy in art and in the Romantic era is a sentiment not only of sadness but of beauty as well. François-René Chateaubriand, who wrote a very important novel named René, which is quite similar to Goethe's Die Leiden des jungen Wert. So melancholy is important. How does it relate to music? One of the eldest citations of melancholy in music we have by Abraham Bartolus in his book Musica Mathematica of 1614, where he writes, "The E minor is the tone of Saturn, and therefore just as Saturn awakens sadness, melancholy and compassion in a person, so this tone also creates a very sad, longing and distressing mood, which brings down the human spirit and makes it sad. And many people are often made to cry because of it. And if you want to make a happy person sad, just sing or play a melody from this tone, and their happy mood will soon subside." Interesting herein is that Bartolus names Saturn. Saturn is related to the Alchemy, and the number 7, actually the 7th day in the Christian week is Saturday. And the metal in Alchemy that is related to the mood of melancholy is lead, so a very heavy metal. Now let's come to Carcassi. The Caprice, Opus 26, number 3, actually is in E minor. The tempo is Moderato con Espressione, so not too fast and very expressive, what he's asking us. So if we take seriously the idea that the E minor has been chosen for expressing melancholy, this is the key of interpretation that we are going to use during this analysis. Let's begin with the form. We have an AABA form, which is quite normal form for a song, for example. But in this, it's not really super regular. As you see in the B part, there is a 7-bar part. This is quite interesting. You remember Saturn, number 7? As harmony, it's not too strange, actually, because we always stay in this range of E minor, G major. So this is the notes actually that are used, and he's not going away from that in no point actually. More important than this is the melody and some signs of dynamics and expression. What are the elements of grief, of mourning, of melancholy in this caprice? Well, we are starting very clearly with E minor, using the lowest note the guitar has. You can't express more clearly E minor as just using the chord. Now, the beginning is subito forte. We have to give an accent on the beginning arpeggio. The next part seems to be piano, even if the original edition in the very first bar does not display this piano, but I think it's meant anyway, because in all the other repetitions it's always displayed. So let's play it piano. So herein we have, going back to moving really very little, and the highest note in the contralto is a semitone. So an interval of sighing, that's really sad. Followed by the minor third, E, G. So minor again. And then this 5-1 that brings back to E minor. So a very clear exposition of E minor as a key, and this sighing E minor in an interval of, well, resignation probably. That could be the mood set in the first 2 bars, repeated identically in the second 2 bars. In the next phrase we move to B7, the dominant in E minor. And here there are more of those sighing minor seconds. E sharp, F sharp. And the E sharp is very dissonant to the lowest note, D sharp here. So the melody does that sighing that we already had in the very beginning. Now let's have a look on the bass in this section. There is an anacrusis before, because we have the B going to D sharp, which is a major third. Again B, but this time E, perfect fourth. Then B to F sharp, which is the fifth. So to some mean the bass jumps are getting larger and augmenting the intensity of this feeling in a very long phrase, actually, because these are 4 bars connected one to another in a long phrasing. Following those ascending line in both soprano and bass, we get A, G, F sharp. This A is reached without a note before it. We had. But now this A stands alone. And this is interesting rhythmically speaking, because if we transcribe the arpeggio in the only melodic line, we have that A on the second beat in a 4/4 time signature. So as this A covers beat 2 and 3, it's actually a syncopation. And the syncopation in music, at least in the Baroque time, had the possibility to express all what is concerned to sin and to guilt, which can be very well be motives of melancholy as well. So if you like, feel that syncopation as an element of melancholy too. Now let's come to the descending bass line. This is interesting. We conclude actually on D sharp, and then as a long anacrusis, so to say, this bass line answered by the B, always on the second of 3 8 notes, which could give us a sensation of sighing as well, because we have some, breathing, so to say, out of time. It could have and could get an expression of uneasiness, of restlessness to some way. Especially if you give a little accent on that B, so you could rhythmically express some uneasiness and some melancholy. And looking more closely again on the bass line, we have D sharp, E D sharp, minor second, now an augmented second, and again a semitone. This could be easily analyzed just at the harmonic minor scale, but actually melodically speaking, this semitone gives us another possibility of sighing expressions for melancholy. There's a lot in there, if you like. In the next section, we have, again, and then it's answered by almost the same what we had before, but this time we are going to D7 and G major. So here we are in the relative major key of E minor, which brings probably some more light in this melancholy mood, without anyway being really happy and gay, because there are always those semitones and half steps with a very dissonant interval in the G sharp. So still the melancholy mood is persisting. With again a semitone here, which is quite normal because this is just the guiding note, so to say. And as we go from D7 to G major, this is the lighter mood. Repeated twice, but only for going back to what we have seen before. And here, really, it's just the same answering. The light and the hope, probably, that G major brought in is, how to say, dampened by the return of E minor with the very same melodical line. So, if there has been hope, it's gone again. The B section brings in some new rhythms and harmony. The chord we have here is A6, or the Neapolitan chord. And this chord alone, once by Mozart, for example, was used in the Magical Flute to underline the word death. So we are still in a very dark mood here. But not only, the melody. It's all semitones. It's really in a very, very small range of music that we are playing. In all is semitones, all is sighing, all is suffering. And there is no real fundamental, because this Neapolitan chord could be an F major with A in the bass, or an A minor with that sixth. It's not really clear, and the A does not really give a stable foundation to that chord. And here we are very dissonant again, turning to what harmonically is E minor, but with the G in the bass. So it's all very heavy, all very frozen, there's no real movement. It's, well, creepy a bit. And again, there could be an element of syncopation with its D sharp. Which resolves 1, 2, 3, 4. From 2 to 4. So after this 4 bars of really sadness, grief, and stillness, there's no movement in here. And it's all, well, frozen. We have kind of resignation in the solution of it. Neapolitan. These thirds that we had at the very beginning. Neapolitan. Minor third from the beginning. And a major third. 3 times the confirmation of the mood of the very beginning. And that was the last new invention in that piece, because what we now get is the ending. The ending is the repetition of the A part. In a 2-bar phrase. Then again, the same beginning, but now we are going up in a perfect fifth to the B. And going up is a very strong motive here, because in the next step we are going up an octave, followed by to G, which is a 10th. So the interval is getting always bigger. But what is more important, we have this ascending line. And if we return to Romanticism and the idea of the soul, of the immortal soul, which could probably disappear dying into heaven, so this could be the soul leaving the body of a dying or dead person, which is anyway kept on earth. By the way, the temperament of melancholy is combined with earth. We are connected to earth by the lowest note of the guitar and this piece, which is the E. So we are still remaining here. And after having reached the highest point, we are going down, ending the piece with the lowest note in this triplet movement. Which is quite typical for Carcassi and for the period, but anyway, in this sense of melancholy, it could be actually the dying of the body. Meanwhile, the soul already has risen to the sky. What is interesting here, technically speaking, Carcassi in his method Opus 59 displays this G as the highest note. And actually, if we have the 17th, which is the 15th fret, and the period guitars had 17 frets. So we are almost in the highest note physically possible for those guitars. And most probably those caprices are thought for amateur players. And, well, pushing them up to play that high is, well, a bit outstanding. So Carcassi is using all the range of both the instrument and the capabilities of the players of those pieces, giving them anyway a very, very intense and expressive piece to play. Last chapter, let's come to some mystic numbers. I already talked about that 7-part section in part B. If we look closely to the ending part, we actually have 5 phrases. And if we count it in this way, we have 5 phrases, and the total of the bars is 35. If we now see that 7-bar section that was just before, we could, if we like, but this is metaphysics, we could do this calculus. 5 per 7, 35. The number of the bars is dividable in 7, and probably it's from there. I don't know actually if Carcassi had that in mind, but why not? If you like that and it helps you to play the piece more intensively with more espressione, this is very valid to think about.